Welcome back to the Caregiver Minute, where every weekday family and professional caregivers gather to refine their skills, gain inspiration, and prepare to serve. A few days ago, Randy Vawdrey and I did a couple of episodes about neuro-inflammation, what happens when the brain is inflamed. And we talked about how you can tell when there's inflammation in the brain. In one of those episodes, Randy talked about a woman who had a slowed motor functioning on one side of her body. And it wasn't because of a stroke. It was because of inflammation. And he had to work with her not only to calm the inflammation, but to rehabilitate that part of her brain. He talked about having her practice leading the music. She was beating time with her hands as if conducting music. And that was activating the part of the brain that needed some stimulation, that needed more synaptic connections to be formed in that area. A principle of neurology is that neurons that fire together wire together. Another way of saying that is that whatever you consistently do over and over carves a deeper path in the brain. Things get easier as you practice them. So if you're trying to get good at foul shots and you shoot the basketball over and over and over, you're carving a more firm pathway in the brain related to how you do that, and it gets easier with time. If you're practicing an instrument, the same kind of thing happens. I bring this up today because many of us are around people that have symptoms of inflammation in one part of the brain or another, and I think it's valuable to start thinking about what we can do from a therapeutic standpoint to stimulate those areas. It's not enough in assisted living or skilled nursing, for example, or when we're serving someone in the home, just to focus on keeping them engaged without thinking about how should we keep them engaged. What kinds of things could we do that would truly be therapeutic? So, for example, let's suppose that we observe someone that doesn't have very good planning skills. They don't have very good reasoning skills. Their social filter seems to be gone, and they just pop off with whatever comment they have. That is evidence of frontal lobe impairment. And taking time to do things that stimulate the frontal lobe could be therapeutic. It might make everything just a little bit easier as people practice those skills. What do you do to practice frontal lobe kinds of things? Well, there are a couple of computer-based programs. There's Brain HQ and there's Lumosity that present different types of cognitive tasks that largely activate the frontal lobe, and they get harder as a person's skills improve. So they're not just static. It's not like doing crossword puzzles or Sudoku every day where you just get good at those things. Those programs actually shift and change. Now, they might be too hard for some people, but there are other things that you could do to stimulate a person's need to plan and use reasoning and judgment and sequencing of tasks. You could do things like putting together a model. There are all sorts of levels of complexity of model airplanes or model cars or other things. You could do a simple model, or you could do a more complex model depending on the skill level of the person that you're serving. What about other things that we might observe where we could intervene in a therapeutic way? Some people really struggle with their speech. They're not only having a hard time finding their words, but they have a difficult time getting the words out. There are specific parts of the brain that are affected in situations like that. And one of the ways that we can stimulate those parts of the brain is to practice reciting poetry, or even better, practice reciting tongue twisters. Tongue twisters are pretty demanding. And if we work through tongue twisters with people and slow things down until they can say it perfectly and then practice saying it faster and faster and faster, it's actually stimulating the right parts of the brain. Now, when people are struggling with speech, it's also helpful to get a good speech therapist involved. They can help stimulate those parts of the brain. Sometimes people have a hypersensitivity to touch, and we can practice training those parts of the brain very carefully by stimulating people in gentle ways. We could have a warm pad that we put in different parts of the body, or we could have a cold pad, and we just gently place it in certain areas and have people talk about what they're sensing. That is stimulating to the right areas of the brain, and it allows them to get more comfortable with sensory experience. If someone has continued struggle with motor functioning, leading music is one option, but so would things like rapid alternating finger movements. We can have people practice things like that to help stimulate motor functioning. Well, I invite you today to start thinking about ways that you can be observant of the deficits that people have and think about what would stimulate that part of the brain. How could we engage someone in meaningful activity that's also therapeutic at the same time? I hope this gives you some interesting things to think about and some ways that you can take action on behalf of the people that you're serving. And I look forward to seeing you again soon for another episode of the Caregiver Minute.